Tonight we're going to discuss the dualistic process that led us to this. The point is to the attitude that you could develop to understand this process is simply direct approach without particular metaphysical, philosophical overlay, that we are going to discuss the simple setups of psychological evolution that takes place and also that took place. And this particular approach is definitely, according to the Buddhist teaching, and also this particular approach leads us to understand ourselves. Another word, that if we don't have any sense of our psychological makeup or understanding, not only in terms of intellectual, metaphysical one, but experientially, that if we do not know who we are, where we are, or if we are at all, that we are relating to the path. Therefore, we have to get into this particular understanding of psychology of the mind is necessary to understand or study. It is not particularly analytical or particularly metaphysical, but just a simple experience that we have experienced already, and it's hard relating subtleties of our own experience that we face constantly in our life process. So, the outline in this particular process is developed as what's known as the evolution of the Five Skandhas. And that is the term skandha, or 5 types of skandha. Skandha is a Sanskrit word which means heap, collection, heap or collection. We could almost say that amalgamation of all kinds of things that brought us together. And the reason why approaching from that way, rather than the particular entity that we are evolving ourselves, is that seemingly there's no such thing as entity, that we are a collection of a lot of stuff together, which are dependent on individuals. They are dependent on individual, relative individuals, rather than on themselves. So, like each grain of sand exists in the relationship with the other grain of sand. If there is no other grain of sand related with this particular grain of sand, that you have no reference point of existence. And phenomena world functions that way, operates that level. That if there is a goodness, then there is badness, wickedness. If there's light, then there is darkness. Everything's worked out from that relative reference. Because this is the case, therefore that is this. So we are constantly involved in that experience, that type of logic, which is a self-existing experience subconsciously that we brought up in our state of being. So it is not imposed on us by our education or our cultural habits of anything at all, but it is something that we automatically picked it up. As we were born, as we have been conceived, we have a sense of the dualism. And as we're born, we have a sense of dualism. And as we have our umbilical cord has been cut, we have also a sense of a dualism. We've been nursed, we have a sense of a dualism. We're brought up, become a teenager, young man, young woman, go to school, have a lifestyle of its own, our own, getting married, having children again, getting sick, feeble, slightly old, and then finally we face death. As we know, every fragment of that experience are a collection of a lot of things put together, a relative reference point put together, which we call life, as if it is a completely tangible and beautiful that we call life. And as we say, life is beautiful, or life is painful. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. How about you? We go through all this self-existing, self-originated process of experience of a relative reference point constantly. The point here, what we're discussing, is that everything we experience in our life is a fragment of a lot of stuff, a lot of things, skandhas of all kinds of things, heaps of all kinds of things, that we can't point at one particular fragment, one particular thing. Therefore, as we discussed last time, that we cannot say that we have one entity, one existence. Automatically, by saying we have a one entity, one existence, which brings the question of other. If one is supposed to survive and exist, you have to have a zero, and you have to have a two to make it into one. So that the process of individuality does not really exist as such. Individuality is purely relative reference from that point of view. And therefore it is called a heap, because a lot of experiences, a lot of failures, achievement, disappointment, and hope and fear, and a lot of millions of trillions of billions of things were put together by little fragment of all kinds of things. And this is what we call me, life, which is, according to the Buddha, is a false remark, because we can't call ourselves me or myself, I, self, soul, because there's nowhere you can point out which part of is me, which part of is you. What is you is uncertain and never found it. Not never found it from the point of view of that you are completely confused, you are stupid. But even the most intelligent and enlightened people couldn't figure it out. for the very fact there's nothing to figure it out. We might feel ourselves got lost in the heaps of skandhas. Maybe that's true. But on the other hand, we could say quite freely that we have never lost, because there's nothing to be lost of. It's constantly churning out of galaxies and galaxies of stars or fragments of sand. That's forming its own shape, dissolving, forming its own shape, dissolving. And that's the basic point of heapness or skandhaness. According to the Buddhist principle that there are 5 types of skandhas, as I've already mentioned. That the first point of skandha of this particular type is a sense of bewilderment. We are completely bewildered. Bewilderment in a sense of not particularly stupidity, ignorant, but we will be bewildered in the sense of not having particular areas to lay our hands on. Everybody possesses that sense of bewilderment, sense of emptiness, if you like to call it, or openness, whatever you like to call it. That sense of groundlessness is always there. And some point that one tend to make home out of this. We would like to build a home, secure home out of this bewilderment. And we tend to grope all over the place. Although not having such things ourselves, but still there is a sense of flow, and the flow in itself will become an entity, a false entity of its kind. The groping takes place constantly. That groping situation creates the other and you, the other and me, you and other, is created. A sense of duplication, sense of separateness has developed, which is a false notion. But however, that falsity seems to be much more secure than the truth, which has no substance, which we find somewhat overpowering, and we don't want to face it. It's too brilliant and too dazzling, too hot or too cold or something, that we would like to compromise and make ourselves somewhat comfortable. We have no idea whether we have a right to do that or not. Because nobody is particularly judging. And that groping process of trying to find a base of some kind had created a sense of further lost, that you begin to realize you have to provide your own ground, your own seat, your own rug, your own chair, your own ground, your own table, your own ceiling, your own walls, all kinds of things had to be created. Otherwise, there isn't anything at all. And that kind of a basic panic, or if you like to call it a basic creativity, is the origin of what's known as the skandha of form. That you made everything out of nothing. Still you haven't made it, but you have made it somehow or other. There is a dichotomy there. you made false out of the truth, because the truth does exist, and therefore you would like to make false out of the truth. According to the Buddha's teaching, this first experience of bewilderment is called basic bewilderment. It is basic to everything. This experience is constantly in everyday life, takes place in every conversation that we might try to make, or between activities, during the activities. Our life is governed by this false notion of something that we are holding on, basic sense of bewilderment. And traditionally it is known as avidya. Vidya in Sanskrit word means insight, cognitive mind functioning. As Professor Gunther calls it, noetic mind. A sense of a cognitive function is all-pervasive, and it is not in the sense of cognition in the ordinary sense of consciousness is functioning in the day life, but subconscious, underconscious mind that has the sense of the doubleness, the two-ness, dualityness, the sense of wholesome sense of being. Me exists because the others exist, therefore I could create my realm as a sense of being. That experience also becomes, ironically, very powerfully joyful to a lot of people. That we begin to finally say, oh, we made it. We found it. You found what? We found it. There is something. At least there's something. What is it? I don't know. But nevertheless, there's something that's happening. Isn't that great? There's something's happening. There's something's taking place. It's extremely hopeful. It is worth celebrating. But at this point we are celebrating on avidya. That we are celebrating further that we are completely stupid. And then the stupidity begins to come rather than bewilderment. And the second stage is stupidity actually. And we are celebrating that we are just about to become stupid after being bewildered. Of course, it is very comfortable to be stupid. And you could play dumb. As if nothing's happening around you, but everything's okay. One never looks and one never asks questions. The questions such as how, why, when, where, what are regarded as very dangerous words to utter. we simply say just is, am, I am. I, if you just say it by itself, feels somewhat slightly shaky, because unless you say am, which qualifies the I-ness, me-ness, and then further else we need more reference point and reassurance, then I am happy, or I am sad, which qualifies the whole stupid statement that I am happy is the utterance of stupidity, or I am sad, or I am whatever. Well, that's the basic form that we have created, which is not only, I would like to make this emphasis again and again, this doesn't mean to say that it has happened once upon a time, that there was a fall of a man and everybody was bad and confused. But this experience, this situation takes place simultaneously in our everyday life situation, constantly. All the time this activity is happening, all the time. This is the basis of our operation, is bewilderment and stupidity, is the basis of our activity. And from that, we begin to develop or evolve ourselves, we might say, is what's called the second skandha, which is the skandha of feeling. That you feel piggish and dumb and groaning. And now I have created myself so solid and so much there. And you have developed big head, a thick neck, and swelled face, that your eyes are tiny, that your mouth can't hardly move, your ears are sinking in, that you are almost solidified as a cast metal statue of me there sitting. You can't even turn your head round because your neck is so stiff and swollen over. Then now we're trying to look around, back and forth, trying to develop some kind of feeling as that the silence of stupidity that we have experienced is again somewhat suspicious. There may be something wrong. As we groan, we look around. That is what's called feeling of skandha, is the second process of ego's development. And from that, we also try to experience distinction, what kind of feedbacks we might have, pleasurable, painful, or neutral experience of feeling. We're trying to get some kind of feedbacks from that. And we grew up round. It's like the traditional analysis that is the pig exploring piggery, trying to find food. trying to develop some kind of discriminating understanding that if you come across with a piece of pebble, you reject it. If you come across with a piece of meat or a piece of fruit, that you try to eat it up. It's a very simple level of feeling. It's an animal or ape level of natural instinct that happens after the stupidity, which also takes part in our state of being. That when we have the sense of bewildered and then being stupid, and we also have some kind of feeling of when we begin to grow up world outside, we might do it quite eloquent or beautifully, as if nothing's wrong, and we probably could try, we usually do, try to hide such clumsiness and try to avoid everything's seeing the clumsiness and trying to avoid that somebody else noticing that. We usually try to be very smooth and genteel. The distinction between animal and human beings or whatever. However, that the sense of animalness, apeness is still there. Particularly when we begin to deal with the sharp edges, which we usually ignore, and when we begin to realize the sharp edges of questionable situations are coming to you, which is challenging from the sense of that your stupidity, your non-existence, the potentialities of no ego, that we're trying to be very graceful, but however not quite succeeding. That's the kind of feeling, is that as if somebody's watching behind your back all the time. At the same time you're being extremely clumsy. And at the same time you're very inquisitive, you want to explore the world outside, because you want to take and give in a very simple level, which is a feeling. Next skandha is what's known as impulse. That having made some rough relationship with the phenomenal world, whatever that may be, having made rough connections with the phenomenal world, and knowing that what textures are smooth, what textures are too rough for you, what textures reasonably okay in the mediocre level. And then we have the impulse to make a big deal out of that. Maybe at that point that your stiffened neck, your swollen face might go down a little bit, and you begin to develop, you begin to have more exercises. After that first period of stupidity, you begin to work yourself hard, develop more physiotherapy, so to speak, by working hard to try to explore the environment, and you become somewhat active and maybe shifty, quick, and impulse, as Buddha described. The impulse, according to the Buddha, that he mentions one of the gathas in the sutra, that he talks about impulse as being a businessman had made his deal already, and he's just about to take his money out of his pocket and give it to the merchant having a sense of pleasure and a satisfaction that you're going to get the particular merchandise you want to buy. There's a sense of you have already that merchandise in your hand. That kind of experience is known as impulse. It's like if you're very hungry, but you have lots of money. Knowing that you can't eat your money, that you go to a place you can buy food. At the very moment when you take out your money from your pocket and purse and hand over to the person who has the food that will sell you, you already tasted the food in some sense. Yummy, yummy. I have already eaten it almost. There's a sense of that you smell the food, you feel the food, you almost can imagine it satisfying you already. That kind of preparation is the impulse. That impulse is frivolous, that you're willing to pay for out of any cost to get what you want. And that kind of output is very frivolous, extremely frivolous, and utterly lacking patience and exertion and discipline and generosity. Let alone say the knowledge of prajna or meditation. The sense of frivolousness brings us together, this point, to the next skandha, which is a concept that conceptualizing what we have got from that buying experience through exercising frivolousness, frivolity. The concept is much more solidified, but still the concept is animal level concept. Rather, the concept is being product of wisdom, product of seeing through barriers of stupidity or ignorance. But this kind of concept is just labeling, naming it, well, quite stupidly, that we bore this particular son or daughter. And we realize that we are parents of this particular child, and we look around and try to find a name for it. The first thing you see around is a piece of rock. Well, shall we call him Rock? That seemed to be possible and seemed to be maybe we feel pretty good that we'll be so smart out of stupidity. Let's call him Rock, call it Rock. Let's call it Spider. Whatever. That's the kind of labeling process is very stupid, oriented from the dualism and a sense of complete void of any kind of vision, any kind of a dance. That's far away from that whole thing. And just labeling it so we have a name for our child. Make sure and save the trouble of thinking further that what this child should be, but just he's called Rock, she's called Rock. spider. It's a very simple and easy thing to do, so we don't have to research anymore, think about it anymore. Just safe, extremely safe. That's the concept. Often it is related with my name is Jack, my name is Jill. That my is not quite enough, I is not quite enough. I had to have a name, so my name is Jack. My name is Jill, which put a final kind of proof of solidity, concept. Maybe you might think this process seem to be activities of stupidity and confused and not so clever, but however, behind all those things, there is it's very cunning. In fact, it is very difficult to remain stupid if you have some sense of cunningness and some sense of cleverness to be stupid. And that goes hand by hand constantly. That in order to remain stupid, you have to pull up all kinds of tricks of stupidity. So that you have to give in to anything else. You don't have to dance with the phenomena world, explore them further. To save from that problem is one tends to do it. Constantly game and gimmick, pull up all kinds of tricks that very convincingly that you are stupid. An ape situation. The next skandha is the fifth skandha, which is consciousness. That having developed a skandha of form, having developed a skandha of feeling, having developed a skandha of impulse, having developed a skandha of concept, then one develops skandha of consciousness. And the consciousness from this point of view is very interesting one. Our consciousness, in a sense that throughout the productions of all those development, that we begin to create something solid and something quick. That we could create automatic reactions to things seem to be the further and final attempt of this non-existence of ego. Attempt to defend itself, attempt to protect itself, attempt to conceal itself, and all kinds of things. The consciousness here is related with the consciousness of 6 sense perceptions. The 6th one is being, according to Buddhist tradition, is the mind element. The sight, smell, hearing, tasting, feeling, and basic mental activity. The cognitive mind in terms of consciousness level. which is fundamentally, basically mean the discriminating sense, that sorting house. It seemed to be the basic point. This particular sorting house, which is consciousness, is based on a level of fascination to a particular sense organs, projects to sense concepts of all kinds. Sight, smell, taste, feeling, thought process, all kinds. There is a sense of you are using those things to protect one's basic stupidity, which you built right at the beginning. We could protect those by playing with the sight, playing with the smell, playing with the sound, and all kinds of levels. Sense of that you would like to protect yourself by simply being pushed out of the corner of the world, so that you have no role in the world, which is egolessness, that you don't want to happen that. And we fight very badly for that, and we would like to strategize that you are the man of the world that can handle all kinds of things. You have your own gimmicks that you can develop, and you can please the world so that the world will be pleasing to you. If the world is nasty to you, you could fight for it. All kinds of defense mechanisms are developed in the level of consciousness. Finally, the final sense of consciousness, which provides those kind of possibilities of reflex mechanism. Which is the fifth skandha. I think the whole process takes place, as I've mentioned already before, that in our everyday, ordinary life, this is not particularly telling the myth of what might happen in the past, what had happened in the past, but it is taking place constantly right here, this very moment, that all five of them operating. And that seems to be the basic preparation so that we could understand ourselves experientially, not particularly intellectually. Then we could discuss maybe tomorrow further details of those five skandhas, and also how one can work in terms of trotting on the path of spirituality, how we can work with it. We could discuss maybe that issue tomorrow. And I think I've presented too much material already, and I wouldn't like to say too many things again to confuse you. So maybe we could at this point get into a discussion. If any one of you like to ask questions in connection with this particular subject.
Rinpoche, until we have experienced these things, they are just concepts to us. These things that you're saying about the Five Skandhas. Is that right?
Say that again.
These Five Skandhas are just concepts to us because we have not experienced them.
That's the problem, yeah. Well, you see, the whole point is that with this particular approach, with this particular course that we are doing together, that there will be some sense of experience that you could work with yourselves, that those particular categories of Five Skandhas does not become purely hypothetical possibilities, but it actually becomes personal experience, that you can detect these five types of functioning takes place within your state of being.
Meditation?
Not necessarily like right now while you're standing there, or as you drive out, as you walk out, as you sleep tonight, as you have your breakfast tomorrow, preparing the breakfast, or having lunch, and studying it, reading book, whatever you do, that there is always the Five Skandha situations are taking place constantly. So this particular approach to see through the Five Skandhas does not have to become a spiritual practice that you particularly take part in, like purely sitting meditation alone, that this experience can be understood and felt through, experienced directly, very simply, by just leading life. As long as there is heedfulness, mindfulness of watching oneself, examining oneself, which doesn't have to become particularly uptight or solemn and religious type thing, but just by being, there's glimpse could throw back on you that you project your Five Skandhas out as you are what you are, which you can't not help. But however, that something could bounce back from the wall to you, to remind you how you are, why you are, what you are. That seems to be the point of this particular, whole course that what we're doing is experiential type of course, with some basic framework of reference from the traditional scriptures and books, that there is categories that you should sharpen your intellect at the same time, but one doesn't become one-sided in any case. So, good luck.
The attempt of the ego with spiritual materialistic methods to escape the dilemma, as which skandhas are operating particularly. After one feels one is in prison and is attempting to break out through a distorted method rather than just seeing the skandhas, which skandha is operating to prevent, which skandha is operating in order to not become aware of the illusion of the other skandhas. I'm not clear with the question, but
I think it's the first skandha actually, that one is ignoring one's own delusion. The first skandha, that one is ignoring one's own delusion and play dumb and deaf, mute. At the beginning of the first skandha level is that you are basically want to get yourself into extremely pleasurable situation. by not even going through the operation or examination, or even for the matter, you don't want to even question yourself at all. So that there's a sense of that you want to protect yourself constantly. That spirituality happens to be without materialism, which means that a lot of stripping out and a lot of examining, a lot of questioning, which you don't particularly like it. So you want to still remain dumb and deaf and mute. And whatever comes to you to tell you that spirituality can practice, you could become higher or greater being, enlightened person, by not giving up any of those trips of your stupidity to one thing, bewilderment, another thing, that if anybody comes to you and tell you that you don't have to give up, everything's okay, don't worry, don't panic, we take care of that, but you don't worry. And you just go back and sleep and sit with us and do whatever you want. Everything's be taken care of. Then obviously you feel great, because it's like you'll be treated like the queen bee. It doesn't have to do any work but be fed. And that is I think spiritual materialistic mentality is related with the first skandha from that point of view. That you don't have to give up your first skandha, then therefore you feel grateful. And you, in fact, you develop your devotions to your teachers and gurus, whatever they may be, who tell you that everything's okay, that you just come along with us and we can do things for you. And the only thing you have to do is smile or whatever, just to be cordial and don't put out any uptight vibrations, which automatically means when you be uptight vibration, which means there's a fear of the loss of your ground, that you might be seen through your first skandha. That's the problem, you see. So if you don't put any vibrations that anybody, including your master, couldn't see through your first skandha, then you feel automatically, of course, very safe. And it feels very good about the whole thing. That in fact, you don't have to do really anything. You might have to do all kinds of things physically. You might have to get up early in the morning, or you might have to stay up late. You might have to refrain from eating certain particular meal, meat or whatever, vegetables, whatever. Those little things doesn't really bother you, your basic first skandha. It doesn't really bother you, but as long as whole thing is fundamentally secured, you feel great, because you hadn't been challenged. And this is what must be fearful, is that when you begin to realize that your whole existence has been questioned, then it is, great dilemma. It's a chaos. It's devastating. But if those great things hadn't been questioned, but even you be told to participate physically, be active, you might have to bend your regular routine for the sake of maintaining your egotism in the first skandha, which seems to be easy. So I think we could say quite safely at this point, the spiritual materialistic mentality comes from the first skandha, from that point of view. Thank you.
Rinpoche, is the insubstantial nature of each skandha cut through separately, or is there a single experience of the emptiness of all five?
Is the single experience? That's a very good question. Is the non-existence of one's basic ground, of non-existence of the first skandha, cuts through the rest of it. You see, there's a problem that we might have if we try to cut through the individual skandhas one by one. You can't really able to cut through them because individual skandhas are based on the original one. So one has to strike the basic bewilderment to begin with, as well as the basic stupidity. So then that cuts through the whole thing. I mean, that's why the basic point of importance to realize the meaning and purpose and idea of spiritual materialism becomes important, because otherwise that you cannot even thinking in terms of beginning, letting alone that beginning on the spiritual path.
Once you see through that and you have a groundless experience, is it possible to again build those 5 skandhas?
Is it possible what?
To start building the 5 skandhas again. Can you just be cyclical and keep going through it?
You see, once you cut through the chain reactions, which perpetuating constantly all the time, it is possible to set a chaos. And having set a chaos, that the bureaucracy of ego doesn't work anymore. So you begin to feel that your particular project's being undermined, or that your trust in that particular project of setting egohood hasn't been quite a successful scheme. So there's a sense of loss of heart, and a sense of confusion, a sense of humbleness, a sense of humility. And from that point, then it is possible to build something else other than spiritual materialism or egohood. So I think that the point is to strike the chain reaction that will be built, the territory that will be set up by ego of the 5 skandha level. Having done that, there is no possibility of renewing its gain anymore. Can we do it here?
Jay, as I understood what you said, the idea of separateness followed the first feeling of bewilderment. But how can bewilderment exist without a notion of separateness to precede it?
Well, that's a very fundamental question. That bewilderment exists by itself. And we call it enlightened state of a being, or we might call it the dark night of the soul. Whatever we call it, there is sense of bewilderment taking place by itself. Of course, when we talk about the term bewilderment, we are talking from the point of view of people from this shore. We are automatically, misusing the word, since we don't have absolute language for it, which would be incomprehensible, I suppose, if we did have even. So we are talking at this point is bewilderment is is the language that we could find from this side of the shore to explain the middle of the no man's land. So bewilderment is by itself, and the confusion that might take around bewilderment is trying to reassure that bewilderment does exist, and so forth. Maybe you'd like to say some more about that? Asking questions? Think about it. Gentleman over there.
I have 7 skandhas here, and I just wonder how...
You have 7 skandhas?
One is bewilderment, stupidity, feeling, impulse, concept, consciousness, and reflex. Now,
Well, we could have hundreds of
I'm interested in getting it down to 5 so I can ask how this compares to the 5 Buddha families.
Well, 5 skandhas being the any areas of confusion and basicness being 1, bewilderment, stupidity, being skandhas of form, basically. How many more skandhas do you have after that? Yes, that's reflex is part of the consciousness. Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter about that. We could discuss maybe later on at the end of the course. But I think what we're trying to do now is trying to understand the basic skandhas in its own nature, and we will discuss later on in our next talk. Next get together, we could discuss more about that. I think people should understand that, one step at the same time. If we present the 5 Buddha principles, there's so many 5s, it becomes very confusing. Gentleman with the yellow, shiny head.
I'm interested in the question of memory, which keeps tricking me into thinking that I have an ego and am a continuous being. Can you speak how the memory fits into the 5 skandhas?
Skandhas. Yeah. Well, memory doesn't seem to be a particular problem, for that matter, that of a dream. Memory is a reflex experience that takes place in the 5th skandha, which is a part of your thought process, as well as your dream. That in the Buddhist tradition of psychology, that we don't talk about dreams and memories being a deeper state of consciousness, of higher level particularly, but we talk about memories and dreams are being exactly the same as just ordinary state of consciousness. I suppose that point come about because that Buddhist approach is being non-theistic, that we're not talking about in context with the God and the divine being as such. So that because of that you don't have a deeper state of mind to communicate with anything. You might have a subtler state of mind like ignorant and feelings and so forth, Well, they are not regarded as a higher state of consciousness, close to lofty ideas, whatever they have. So, memories and dreams are also part of the fifth skandha from that point of view. According to the Abhidharma doctrine, anyway, that they are just subtle form of experience. That you have a dream, you have a memory because you have a consciousness. You are operating during the day, your mind is functioning, your consciousness is functioning, your 5 types of emotions, hate, anger, pride, envy, and ignorant, and so forth is operating throughout during the day. So because you function yourself during the day, therefore you have a reflex of that. The memories of those are memories, and your dreams about it because of those. So that's the kind of situation. So it seems to be very basic and very ordinary. So memory and the reflex experience of all kinds, including the dream state, is not regarded as particularly mystical experience or subtle experience at all. It's just a part of the mental activities that takes place, basically.
There's a continuity to memory. Is denying the existence of ego also denying that continuity? Or do we assert that there is a continuity to egolessness?
Well, yes, continuity of egolessness. Otherwise you can't function. You see that, like, very simple. You can't sit there and listen to this talk tonight if you can't breathe. Each time when your breath is changing, your mind is changing constantly. You are being born and dead at the same time, constantly. So because you are continual birth and death, you're able to take part in this particular meeting tonight. And that's very rough, but that's roughly all about. The lady in the white shirt over there, dark hair.
We're aware of these 5 skandhas, and we watch the cycle of them coming up. And we're aware of the apparent beginning, but in my previous experience, that's not enough to root it out, that the apparent beginning is not really the beginning. And I have a great deal of confusion on that point.
Do you mean
back to its root.
Do you mean you want to say that you want to deep-root it out?
Possibly, or either.
Very ambitious young girl.
Definitely.
Well, the point is not so much of deep-rooting whatever, but the point is to work with it and study it and learn about the basic mechanism of what's going on. Then maybe there's some process of non-aggression, non-aggressive, peaceful way of working with it. So we are not talking about that ego as being a villain, should be killed and destroyed utterly, and that we're going to gain victory of some kind. We are not talking about, liberation from that point of view, either masculine or feminine or spiritual oriented or whatever. We're not talking about gaining liberation of that nature, particularly at this point, if I may say so. We are talking about how we could understand what we are all about, which is the biggest problem that we have faced so far, that we did not know who we are, what we are, if we are at all. And that has been the problem. So what we're studying and doing here is we're just trying to figure out what it's all about from that point of view. And I think that I learn about liberation, we should discuss about it later. And maybe it is not particularly an issue by the time when we find something which is different than what we're trying to think. It's not quite in the sense of, I think we have to give up the idea of a business type of approach or political type of approach, that if I invade your territory, will you give yourself into me? We are not talking about a warfare. We are not particularly talking about power over other, but we are purely talking about understanding, which is very simple and direct. So I think if you like to relax more, and as long as if you can stay throughout the rest of the course that we are doing, I think we have some understanding coming up at the end that which might make sense. And I find it very easy and comfortable, actually, if I may say, that people are coming back and back and back again to this particular talk and this particular course, so that I don't have to repeat again the new phrases, new concept that we talked about before, so that you have some familiarity, so that we could go on to the next process. We could build our ideas, and not exactly at the level of final promise or the final trick as such, but maybe something close to it.
I don't understand exactly the difference between
You
someone...
don't understand what?
Okay. In the beginning, there seems to be some kind of tendency to protect or something. And that tendency apparently doesn't... Well, the tendency leads off onto all the skandhas and the development and so on, and the confusion. Is that tendency absent in you?
Which tendency are you talking about?
As I understand, kind of from an intellectual point of view, there's, rather than being open, at some point we get excited and decide to close or something.
The ego tendency that we discussed.
The very
ignorance,
the primary ignorance kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that absent, or do you?
Is that what?
Is that absent in you now, or what? I mean, why is it if we're the same kind of thing, why do we somehow end up like this and you don't?
Well, I don't know why, but maybe that's the basic point. What we are discussing here is not particularly why, but it is the case. And it's up to you to figure out, as a student of Naropa Institute, that you should figure out why. And that's precisely, in fact, very powerful thing, that the student and teacher relationship could be kept beautifully. And the purpose for education becomes a mutual discovery, rather than the professor tells you everything, absolute, every detail, that you are completely bewildered, overloaded with information. that you have no other choice than except to say, yeah, you're right. And that's we seem to become the problem. But what we're trying to do here is that you can also improvise. And the basic point here, that point is you'll be presented with a point of view, and why it is the case, it's up to you. Experientially, intellectually, both. And maybe you could tell us next time when we meet again. I would be delighted. Gentleman in the blue shirt over there.
What are the names of your children?
I beg your pardon?
What are the names of your children?
I'm sorry, I don't see the connection particularly, but maybe you think there might be something. My first child is called Ursel, which means luminosity. My second child is called Taktup, which means the tiger's cub. And my third child is called Kesar, which means Caesar. You're welcome. Let's try this gentleman with the bee. With the bees.
We spoke of the skandhas as a sort of prison we get wrapped up in.
I spoke what?
Of the skandhas as a prison that closes in around us. It seems to me that if we manage to tune in to some real entity outside us, that it would help these things to fall away, help us see them. Maybe you could speak a little about the path of devotion as a way of...
I'm sorry, you're too fast for me.
I'm asking if you could talk a little about devotion as a way of seeing through the skandhas, rather than working at them from the inside and constantly coming back on the skandhas, but going through them and tuning into someone that's outside
devotion?
the skandhas.
Yes. Well, you see, the question of devotion is equally intriguing, and at the same time it is somewhat misleading. It does seem to become the problem. And when we talk about terms of devotion, we're talking in terms of surrendering, giving up, opening ourselves to whatever, the lineage or the heritage of the doctrine, or the blessings that we receive, whatever, which are all valid, but at the same time, the preparation of such a receiver of certain particular blessing is very important. What we are doing at this point in studying the basic path course that we are conducting right here now is based on, we are talking about a path rather than graduation. That in fact, somewhat what we are talking about here is that you haven't been to the school yet, but you are leaving your parents' home and you're driving your way out to the college. And we haven't even got to the college yet, which will be maybe next course. In the second semester, we'll be talking about Vajrayana tantric traditions, teachings of all kinds. Maybe then when we'll be talking about getting into the actual house of learned situation, house of learning. So far, this study of the path we're discussing is we're still talking about a journey that you have to make your trip and you have to walk properly. We're talking about a style of walking at this point, and it seems that we haven't got as far as to the level of devotion yet. As they say, next year we'll be in Jerusalem. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe we should close our meeting at this point tonight.